My name is Marigold, and I'm 45 years old. I've spent most of my adult life surrounded by flowers, roses, tulips, lilies, all whispering their silent truths to me as I arrange them into careful bundles of beauty for other people's special moments. My shop isn't big, but it's enough. It's quiet, predictable, and honest, everything my life used to be before that phone call from my daughter changed it. I still remember the exact tone of Roxanne's voice when she called me that morning, sweet, but edged with something else. It had been weeks since I'd heard from her, maybe even months. She'd gotten busy, she said, working in real estate marketing, living her glamorous city life while I stayed behind in the small town that raised us both. I always told myself that distance was normal, that children grow up and move on. But when I saw her name flash on my phone, my heart leapt the way it always did. No matter how old she got, she was still my little girl. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone sugary but rehearsed. "Listen, I want you to come to dinner this Friday. There's something I want to talk to you about." "Dinner?" I smiled, trying to sound casual even as hope fluttered in my chest. "Of course. What's the occasion?" There was a pause. Then she added, "Bring cash. At least 2,000. I actually laughed, certain I'd misheard her. "Cash," she repeated, flatly this time. 2,000. "Don't worry, you'll understand at dinner." She said it like it was nothing, like asking your mother for $2,000 was the same as asking for a ride to the grocery store. I froze, clutching the phone, searching her tone for some hint of a joke. There wasn't one. "Roxanne, that's a lot of money," I said slowly. "What's this about?" "Just bring it, okay? It's important." Her voice hardened, losing all warmth. "Please, Mom. Don't make it a big deal." The line went quiet. Then she hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the faint smell of coffee and carnations, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. My daughter had invited me to dinner and demanded $2,000 like it was the price of entry. That entire day I couldn't shake the unease. Between helping customers, I kept replaying the conversation, searching for meaning. Was she in trouble? Or had I raised someone who thought of me as nothing but an ATM? The thought twisted my stomach into knots. By the time I closed up the shop, I'd already made up my mind. No matter what this was, she was my daughter, and if she needed help, I'd find a way. That's what mothers do, even when it hurts. I went to the bank the next morning and withdrew the cash. The teller gave me a curious look when I asked for it in large bills. I smiled weakly and said, "A family thing." She didn't need to know that I'd just emptied most of my savings, the small emergency fund I'd kept hidden since my husband passed years ago. It wasn't much, but it was security. Still, I told myself, if Roxanne truly needed it, what kind of mother would I be if I said no? As I drove home, the autumn wind rustled through the trees lining our street. Leaves skittered across the windshield like they were trying to warn me of something. Every instinct in me whispered that this wasn't right. But love, that relentless, irrational thing, drowned it out. That night I pulled out an old photo album. There she was, Roxanne at 5 years old, holding a bouquet bigger than her face, her smile wide and wild. She'd always wanted the world and believed it would bend for her. Even as a child, she demanded things like they were owed to her: the best costume at the recital, the front seat in the car, the last piece of cake. I used to laugh about it. "She's just confident," I'd tell people. But, as the years went on, confidence grew teeth. When she got her first job, she quit after a week because her manager didn't respect her talent. When she borrowed money for college, she switched majors 4 times and dropped out after 2 years. Every time she fell, I caught her. Every time she demanded, I gave. I told myself it was love, but deep down, I knew it was guilt for raising her alone. Guilt for not giving her a father. Guilt for every missed birthday while I worked overtime to keep us afloat. By Friday evening, the money was sealed in a white envelope tucked inside my purse. I stood before the mirror in my modest navy dress, brushing my hair one last time. My reflection looked older than I remembered: tired eyes, soft lines carved by worry and years. I whispered to myself, "You're just having dinner with your daughter, that's all." The restaurant she chose was in the city, one of those sleek places with valet parking and wine lists longer than novels. I hadn't been anywhere like that in years. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I drove, every mile feeling heavier. When I finally parked outside, the glowing sign reflected off my windshield like a warning beacon. I took a deep breath, checked the envelope once more, and forced a smile. "It's just dinner," I murmured again, stepping out into the cool night air. By the time I parked outside the fancy restaurant that night, I already knew this dinner wasn't about family. The restaurant looked like something out of a magazine, all glass, gold, and soft jazz, a place I'd never fit in. The kind of place where the air smells faintly of truffle oil and money, where laughter sounds rehearsed, and every server glides instead of walks. I clutched my purse a little tighter as I followed the hostess inside. My shoes clicked too loudly on the marble floor, and my thrift store dress felt like it was announcing my presence with every step. "Table for Roxanne Mayfield," I said, trying not to sound nervous. The hostess smiled politely and led me to the back, where the lighting dimmed and the tables were lined with wine glasses that probably cost more than my entire dinner budget. Then I saw her. Roxanne looked radiant, or at least, that was the image she wanted to project. Her dark hair was sleek, her lipstick bold, and her outfit screamed luxury. A champagne-colored silk dress paired with heels so tall they seemed to defy logic. Beside her sat a man I didn't recognize, maybe early 30s, with the kind of smirk that said he'd never been told no. "Mom," she said, rising from her seat with exaggerated enthusiasm. "You made it!" I smiled and leaned in for a hug, but she only offered one arm, the other still clutching her phone. Her perfume hit me like a wall, expensive and artificial. "This is Ethan," she said as we sat down. "My boyfriend." Ethan extended his hand lazily, his eyes scanning me the way one might scan a price tag. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Mayfield," he said, his tone polite but detached. His handshake was brief, limp, a gesture of obligation. "So, you're the florist," he added, as if the word carried a faint odor. "I am," I replied, forcing a smile. "Been at it nearly 20 years now." "Wow," he said, sipping his wine. "That's quaint." Roxanne laughed, not kindly but nervously, like she wanted to smooth over his rudeness. "Ethan's just kidding, Mom. You know how he is." I didn't, but I was already starting to. The waiter arrived, addressing Roxanne and Ethan like they were regulars. Roxanne ordered for all of us, without even asking what I wanted. "We'll start with the oysters, then the filet for me, lobster for him. And," she glanced at me briefly, "Mom will have the pasta." I opened my mouth to protest but decided against it. It wasn't worth making a scene. As the waiter disappeared, I studied my daughter, her polished nails, her confident posture, the way she held her wine glass by the stem, just like the rich women in movies. I wanted to be proud, but something in her eyes unsettled me. They were sharp, calculating, not the eyes of a dreamer, but a dealer. So, I began softly, "You seem happy. How's work?" "Busy," she said quickly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Real estate marketing's intense, but I'm killing it. Big clients, big projects, you know, the grind." Ethan leaned in, grinning. "We're actually thinking about starting something new, luxury interior branding. Big money in that space." "Luxury interior, what?" I asked, genuinely lost. He chuckled. "Don't worry about it, it's complicated." Roxanne laughed along with him, then reached for her wine again. "It's like design consulting, Mom, very upscale. We're networking with investors already." Their words buzzed around me like static, full of gloss but empty of meaning. They talked about money like it was oxygen. I nodded, pretending to follow. But deep down, my heart was sinking. The food arrived, a parade of plates I couldn't pronounce. Roxanne was in her element, gesturing dramatically, talking about penthouses and brand deals, barely noticing that I hadn't touched my pasta. She was performing for Ethan, for the waiter, maybe even for herself. "Mom," she said suddenly, snapping me back to attention. "You should think about rebranding your shop. You could call it something modern like Petal House or something." People pay more when it sounds classy. I think my customers like things simple, I said gently. She sighed, rolling her eyes. That's the problem. You don't think big enough. Ethan smirked and raised his glass. That's why she has us now, babe. We think big. I forced another smile, though my stomach twisted. This wasn't a dinner, it was a display. Roxanne wasn't inviting me to share a meal. She was showcasing her transformation into someone I barely recognized. The waiter refilled my water. I glanced around the restaurant, couples laughing softly, waiters gliding between tables, chandeliers casting warm light across white tablecloths. Everything gleamed, yet felt hollow. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere warmer. Do you still paint? I asked. She used to love it as a girl. She'd cover our kitchen table with brushes and colors, creating messy masterpieces. She blinked, surprised. Oh, that. No, I outgrew it. Art doesn't pay bills, Mom. Ethan chuckled. Unless you're selling NFTs. Roxanne laughed loudly at that, her voice carrying across the room. My heart ached a little at the sound so loud, so forced, so unfamiliar. The waiter cleared our plates, and for a brief moment, silence settled over the table. Roxanne adjusted her napkin, her movements suddenly slower, more deliberate. Then she looked at me. Really looked. Her voice softened, but only just. So, did you bring the cash? Then Roxanne cleared her throat, looked me dead in the eye, and said, So, did you bring the cash? Her words hit me like a slap, not even hidden behind politeness or shame. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of other diners, the faint jazz playing from hidden speakers, it all blurred together as I blinked at her across the table. My daughter, my only child, sat there perfectly calm, waiting for an answer as if she'd asked me to pass the salt. Roxanne? I started carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you need the money for? She sighed, leaning back in her chair like I'd just inconvenienced her. Mom, don't make this weird. I told you it's for an investment. Ethan and I are launching something huge, luxury branding for real estate. We just need a little boost to get started. Ethan nodded, swirling his wine with the ease of a man who'd done this speech before. It's all legit. We're pooling funds, and we just need a small family contribution to hit our first target. Family contribution? I repeated, feeling the sting in my chest deepen. Honey, I thought this was dinner. I didn't realize I was being recruited. Roxanne rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Mom. Don't make it sound shady. You always said you wanted me to chase my dreams, well, this is it. And it's time for you to actually support me instead of just talking about it. The air around me seemed to grow colder. I glanced at Ethan, who gave a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at me the way someone might look at a mark, a number, not a person. My fork trembled slightly in my hand as I placed it back down. Roxanne, I said slowly, $2,000 is a lot of money. I don't have much left after bills and the shop. Please, Mom, she interrupted sharply, lowering her voice but not her tone. You always say that. You have savings. You've been sitting on them for years. I'm asking for a fraction of what you probably have tucked away. I froze. She didn't know I'd withdrawn the money. I hadn't told her. Somehow, she'd assumed I'd just obey, as if my finances were hers by default. Her certainty broke something in me. I'd spent decades protecting her, working late nights at the shop, skipping meals to afford her dance lessons, her clothes, her dreams. But sitting here now, I realized she saw me not as her mother but as a resource, an endless well she could draw from, no matter how dry it ran. I can help you with $500, I said quietly, reaching for compromise. That's what I can afford right now. Her head snapped toward me. She repeated, her laugh sharp and humorless. What am I supposed to do with $500? Mom, that's insulting. I flinched. It's not meant to be. It's what I can give. I want to help, but what? She snapped, her voice rising despite the people glancing from nearby tables. You never really believed in me, did you? Every time I've tried to do something big, you've held me back. Always acting like I'm reckless. Maybe you just like seeing me fail. Ethan shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. He watched the scene with mild amusement, his fingers tracing lazy circles around his glass stem. "That's not true," I said softly. "I've done nothing but believe in you, Roxanne. Every single thing I've done, then prove it." She interrupted. "You say you love me, but when I need you to show it, suddenly you have excuses." That word "show" echoed in my mind like a cruel dare. She didn't want love, she wanted proof. Love, to her, had a price tag. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling under the table. "Sweetheart, I came here tonight hoping we'd have dinner, talk, maybe reconnect. I wasn't expecting to fund a business. I just wanted to see you." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Then maybe you should have stayed home." For the first time, I saw it clearly, the manipulation behind the smile, the entitlement beneath the charm. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes burn. I wanted to cry, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. Ethan finally spoke, breaking the tension. "Rox, maybe we should just let your mom think about it," he said. But there was no warmth in his tone. It sounded rehearsed, like damage control. "No," she said, glaring at him. "We don't have time to think. This is our launch week, and if she cared, she'd help. It's not even that much money." Her voice grew louder, drawing more attention. I wanted to disappear. My palms were slick with sweat, and my heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I reached into my purse, feeling the envelope brush against my fingertips. The very thing she wanted, I had it. But in that moment, something inside me hardened. Giving it to her now would only feed the greed that was devouring her from the inside. I let my hand fall away. "Roxanne," I said quietly but firmly, "money isn't how you measure love. If that's all this dinner is about, then maybe we need to rethink what we call family." She scoffed, standing abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "You know what? Forget it. I should have known better than to expect you to actually do something useful." She snatched her purse, glaring at me with a venom I'd never seen in her eyes before. "You always said you wanted me to succeed, but you can't even help me when it matters. Pathetic." And then she turned to Ethan. "Come on, we're done here." Ethan hesitated for half a second, maybe out of discomfort, maybe embarrassment, before following her toward the exit. I sat frozen, staring at the untouched pasta in front of me. The envelope in my purse suddenly felt heavier than gold. I paid for my meal in silence, my hands shaking as I signed the bill. The waiter gave me a sympathetic smile I couldn't return. As I stepped out into the night, the chill hit my face like truth itself. That's when I decided if money was all she respected, I'd give her something worth every penny. I drove home from that dinner numb, but my mind replayed every moment of her childhood. The city lights faded in my rearview mirror, blurring into streaks of gold and red, like the remnants of a dream I no longer believed in. I kept hearing her voice, sharp, demanding, cold. "Bring cash. Prove you love me." Those words echoed through the car like a cruel melody. I'd raised that voice. I'd nurtured it. I'd taught it to speak, and now, it spoke only the language of greed. The drive back to my little town felt longer than usual. My hands clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white as the empty highway stretched ahead. The envelope still sat in my purse beside me, untouched, heavier than any object should feel. I'd thought about throwing it out the window just to free myself of its weight, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because part of me still wanted to believe she'd call and apologize, that this was all some big misunderstanding. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the silence of my house wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I kicked off my shoes, hung up my coat, and stood in the living room staring at the photographs on the wall. There she was, my little girl, missing her front teeth, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear bent. Another photo showed her at her high school graduation, eyes bright, smile wide. I used to look at those pictures with pride. Now, they felt like a timeline of slow betrayal. I sat down on the couch and opened my old photo album. The one I hadn't touched in years. The first page showed her first birthday party, I'd baked a cake myself, it came out lopsided, and she'd smeared frosting all over her face, laughing like the world was hers. I turned the pages slowly, each memory a small cut. Roxanne at age 8, painting a picture of our house with sunflowers bigger than the roof. Roxanne at 12, demanding the most expensive ballet shoes because the cheap ones don't feel like real ones. Roxanne at 16, rolling her eyes when I said no to a new phone. She'd always been bright, too bright, maybe. Ambitious, confident, hungry for more. I used to admire that fire in her, thinking it would protect her from the world's cruelty. But I'd confused confidence with entitlement. Every time she wanted something, I found a way to give it to her, even when it hurt, even when it meant working double shifts or skipping groceries. I told myself it was love, that she deserved better than what I had growing up. But love, without boundaries, becomes poison. And I had been feeding her poison for years. I thought of the day her father died, how she'd been only 9, how I'd promised her that everything would still be okay. "Mom will take care of you," I'd said, kneeling beside her small, trembling body. I meant it with my whole heart. And I did take care of her too much. I gave her comfort when she needed lessons, praise when she needed perspective. I became her protector, her provider, her excuse. Now I was her wallet. I ran my fingers over one photo, her first art contest. She'd painted a vase of tulips. I remembered the pride in her voice when she said, "I want to be an artist, Mom." That was before she decided dreams needed profit margins. I wondered when exactly the joy drained from her ambitions, replaced by the hollow hunger for status. The tears came quietly at first. I hadn't cried in years, not really. But that night, sitting under the dim light of my living room, I let them fall freely. For the little girl she used to be, for the mother I failed to be, for the years I spent mistaking giving for loving. When the tears stopped, I sat there for a long while, breathing in the stillness. The house smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser I kept by the window, a habit from my shop. I thought about the women who came in to buy flowers for their daughters. "She just got promoted," they'd say proudly. Or, "She's getting married next month." I always smiled politely, arranging roses for their celebrations. But now I wondered, did they ever worry, like I did, that they'd raised someone who saw love as currency? The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I got up and walked to my desk, the one covered in old receipts and floral catalogs. I pulled open a drawer and found a dusty notebook, one I used to keep when Roxanne was little. Inside were old lists, things to buy for school, bills due, her favorite meals. But on the last page, there was something. I'd forgotten a quote I'd scribbled years ago. "To give without teaching gratitude is to plant without watering." I stared at that line for a long time. It hit me harder than I expected. I had given her everything, but I had never made her earn it. And now she didn't know the value of anything. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My reflection in the window looked tired. Yes, but there was something else there too. Resolve. Quiet, deliberate, unfamiliar. Maybe it had been buried under guilt all these years. But it was still there, a spark of something strong. I set the glass down and reached for my phone. Not to call Roxanne, not yet. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a name I hadn't seen in years: June Harrow, my oldest friend. She ran a local shelter downtown. The last time we spoke, she'd told me about the people they fed, the families they saved with so little. $2,000 could change lives there, not just buy another designer bag or failed business venture. As I hovered over her name, my heart began to calm. The ache turned into a plan. I didn't want to hurt Roxanne. I wanted to teach her, to remind her of the values she'd buried under vanity and greed. And in that clarity, I began to plan the dinner she'd never forget. I didn't want revenge at first, I just wanted her to understand value. That thought repeated in my mind for days, like the ticking of a metronome, keeping rhythm with my growing resolve. Every morning I went to the shop, trimmed stems, wrapped bouquets, and smiled at customers. But underneath that quiet routine, something new pulsed inside me, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. If Roxanne believed love could be measured in money, then I'd make her see what real wealth looked like. I called June that afternoon. Her voice, warm and grounded as ever, poured through the phone like a balm. "Marigold, it's been ages," she said, the sound of chatter and clinking dishes in the background suggesting she was at the shelter's kitchen again. "Too long," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "Listen, I've got a question for you. Do you still take direct donations for community meals?" "Of course," she said instantly. "We're actually short on funds this month. Heating bills, food costs, you know how it goes. Why? You thinking of helping us again?" "Yes," I said, glancing toward my purse where that envelope still rested. "But this time, I want to do it differently. I want it made in my daughter's name." June paused, clearly surprised. "That's generous of you. Can I ask why?" I smiled to myself. "Let's just say it's a lesson in gratitude." By the end of that call, the plan was set. I would donate the full $2,000 to the shelter, every dollar Roxanne had demanded, but I'd have it done in her honor. June promised she'd prepare a framed certificate for recognition. "We'll even host a little dinner to thank contributors," she said. "You two should come." That was the part that sealed it. A dinner just like the one Roxanne had planned. But this one would serve people who knew what it meant to need. People who didn't measure affection by the size of an envelope. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd once helped Roxanne with her homework. I wrote a small note to accompany the donation. "May this gift bring warmth to those who need it most, given in love, from Roxanne Mayfield." I signed it and sealed it with care. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was still giving her something. But this time it wouldn't feed her greed. It would nourish her conscience. The next few days moved like poetry. I stopped by the shelter, and June welcomed me with open arms. The building was old but alive, full of laughter, chatter, and clattering pans. Volunteers hustled between tables, serving soup, bread, and kindness. A little girl with pigtails handed me a paper heart she'd cut out herself. It said, "Thank you for helping us." I nearly cried. "This," June said softly beside me, "is what your donation does. It keeps the lights on. It keeps hope alive." I nodded, the envelope in my purse feeling lighter already. "Then it's worth every cent." June printed the certificate as promised, cream-colored paper framed with gold edges. Across the top, in elegant script, it read, "Presented to Roxanne Mayfield, in recognition of compassionate contribution to Hope Haven Shelter." Seeing her name there filled me with something complicated: pride, sorrow, and a quiet ache. She hadn't earned it, not yet, but maybe this was the seed of change. Later that evening, I called her. I forced a tone of warmth, careful not to reveal the layers beneath. "Roxanne, I was thinking about our last dinner," I began. "You caught me off guard, and I want to make it right. Let's meet again, same restaurant. My treat." There was a pause. Then her tone softened, or pretended to. "Really? So you'll help us then?" "I will," I said simply. "But I want to tell you in person." She sounded triumphant, almost smug. "Perfect. Ethan and I will be there Friday at 7. You won't regret this, Mom." I hung up before my voice could betray me. I wasn't sure if this was revenge or redemption, but I knew it had to happen. Maybe I couldn't undo the years of indulgence that twisted her values, but I could hold up a mirror to them. Friday came faster than I expected. I closed the shop early and got ready. I wore the same navy dress, pressed neatly this time, and tied my hair back in a loose bun. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed the faintest smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Not from gloating, from certainty. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat trembling through the first dinner. I had something stronger now: conviction. Before leaving, I slipped the framed certificate into a gift bag wrapped in gold tissue paper. It looked elegant, ironically fitting for someone like Roxanne. I added a handwritten card that said, "For your investment in something truly meaningful." The words carried their own quiet sting. When I arrived at the restaurant, the valet took my car again, and the lights looked just as bright, but I didn't feel small anymore. I walked with steady steps to the same table as before. The waiter recognized me and gave a polite nod. "Welcome back, Mrs. Mayfield." "Thank you," I said, my voice calm. "It's a special night." Roxanne and Ethan arrived fashionably late, of course. She looked stunning, radiant with self-assurance, as though the world bent for her. Ethan was on his phone, half listening, half absorbed in something else. "Mom," she said, air kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you came. Did you bring—" I raised a hand gently. "Let's enjoy dinner first." They ordered wine expensive again, and I let them fill the silence with talk about networking events and investors. I smiled, nodded, and waited. Every word they spoke only confirmed how blind they were to what truly mattered. When the main course arrived, I placed the gift bag on the table. "I did bring something," I said. "I wanted to give it to you properly." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, thank God," she said, reaching eagerly. "I knew you'd come through." "Open it," I said, smiling faintly. As her manicured fingers pulled out the frame, the glow on her face began to falter. Her brow furrowed as she read the inscription once, then again. Ethan leaned over, squinting. "What is this?" Roxanne's lips parted, confusion mixing with disbelief. "A certificate?" she whispered. "For a shelter?" I folded my hands neatly. "Yes," I said softly. "A $2,000 donation to Hope Haven Shelter. Made in your name. You're there. Newest honorary contributor." For a moment she didn't speak. The silence around the table grew thick enough to choke on. Her mouth opened then closed. Ethan smirked, thinking it must be a joke. "It's not funny, Mom," Roxanne said finally, her voice trembling with anger. I looked at her, calm and steady. "It's not meant to be funny, darling. It's meant to be valuable." I didn't know it then, but that dinner would change both our lives forever. The second dinner felt eerily familiar, same tone, same distance, but this time, I wasn't nervous. I sat at that glossy table with the same linen napkins, the same flickering candles, but the air tasted different. I wasn't there to please anyone. I wasn't the anxious mother begging for affection. I was calm, almost serene, watching the story unfold exactly as I'd planned. Roxanne looked beautiful as always, though beauty seemed to have become her armor. She laughed too loudly, gestured too widely, and kept glancing around to make sure others were watching. Ethan, beside her, checked his phone between sips of wine, tossing in a hollow compliment now and then to keep her entertained. They were a matching pair, all shine, no depth. "So, Mom," Roxanne said, tapping her manicured nails against the table, "you said you wanted to make things right. I really appreciate that." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "You did bring the cash this time, right?" Her casual confidence made me almost pity her. "Almost. I did bring something," I said, my voice smooth, unhurried. "But it's not exactly what you're expecting." She tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "Oh, what's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my purse and set the golden gift bag on the table. "Open it, and you'll see." Her eyes brightened as she pulled out the frame, still wrapped in delicate tissue paper. She unwrapped it quickly, like a child on Christmas morning. The smile on her face froze the moment her eyes caught the words. She blinked once. Twice. Her mouth opened slightly as she read the inscription aloud. "Presented to Roxanne Mayfield, in recognition of compassionate contribution to Hope Haven Shelter." Her voice faltered on the word, compassionate. Ethan leaned over, peering at the frame, clearly confused. "Wait, a donation certificate?" "Yes," I said softly. $2,000, donated to the shelter in your name. They're hosting a dinner next week to honor contributors. You're their newest patron." Roxanne stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. You donated my money?" "No," I corrected gently. "I donated my money. In your honor." Her face turned scarlet. She glanced around the room, noticing the curious stares of nearby diners. "This is a joke, right?" she whispered harshly. "Please tell me this is a joke." "It's not," I said calmly, sipping my water. "I wanted you to see what $2,000 can really do. Feed families, keep people warm, build something that lasts." Ethan chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You've got to be kidding me. A shelter? That's where the money went?" Roxanne's jaw tightened. "Mom, You embarrassed me. Do you even realize how this looks? Ethan and I had real plans, business plans, and you just gave away the investment. I set down my glass. Investment? I repeated. You wanted money, but you never told me what for. You wanted validation. That's what this was about, wasn't it? Not business. Approval. Don't psychoanalyze me, Mom, she snapped, her voice rising. You always do this, twist things so you can feel superior. Rocks? Ethan muttered, glancing around uncomfortably. Maybe we should… No. She cut him off. She needs to hear this. You've always been jealous, Mom. Jealous that I wanted more than your little flower shop. Jealous that I actually have ambition. The words hit me like tiny darts, not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I'd feared. My daughter didn't just misunderstand love, she despised it when it didn't serve her. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my tone so only she could hear. Ambition without empathy is just greed, Roxanne. I'm not jealous of you. I'm heartbroken for you. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, vulnerability, confusion, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You're unbelievable, she said, shaking her head. You really think donating to some shelter makes you a saint? No, I said simply. It makes me someone who remembers what matters. Ethan shifted in his seat, clearly eager to escape the awkward scene. Maybe we should just… But Roxanne wasn't done. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor, her voice slicing through the restaurant. You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. Do you know how insane this looks? Who does that donates in someone else's name without asking? All eyes were on us now. The waiter froze mid-step, pretending not to listen. The couples at nearby tables whispered behind their menus. I stayed seated, perfectly still, letting her fury burn itself out. When she finally paused for breath, I said quietly, someone who loves you enough to stop enabling you. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Roxanne's chest rose and fell rapidly. Ethan's hand hovered awkwardly near her arm, unsure whether to comfort her or stay out of it. She looked at me as though I'd betrayed her in the deepest way possible, not by withholding money, but by refusing to play the role she'd written for me. You'll regret this, she hissed finally. Don't expect to hear from me again. She grabbed her purse, stormed toward the exit, and shoved past a waiter holding a tray of drinks. Ethan hesitated only a moment before tossing a few bills on the table and following her out. And just like that, she was gone, my daughter, my pride, my mistake, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of her heels on marble. The waiter approached tentatively. Would you like me to pack your food, ma'am? I smiled faintly. No, thank you. I'm done. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, the city lights reflected off the restaurant windows, casting my reflection back at me calm, firm, and strangely free. I hadn't given Roxanne what she wanted, but maybe, just maybe, I'd given her what she needed. Then she slammed the envelope on the table and screamed, You've embarrassed me in front of everyone! Everyone in the restaurant turned to stare, but I didn't flinch. For years, I'd backed down at the first sign of Roxanne's anger when she was a teenager slamming doors, when she was 20 borrowing money and ghosting me afterward, when she was 24 and still blaming me for everything she'd done wrong. But not this time. Her voice might have been loud, but for the first time, mine didn't shake inside me. She stood there in her glittering dress, trembling with fury, her face red beneath perfect makeup. You always do this, she spat. You make everything about you. I invite you to dinner, I ask for help, and you turn it into some performance so you can feel superior. I looked at her quietly, my hands folded in my lap. This isn't a performance, Roxanne, I said evenly. This is what love looks like when it stops being blind. Love? She sneered, the word dripping with sarcasm. You call this love? You humiliated me. You couldn't just say no, you had to make a scene. Ethan tried to put a hand on her arm. Rox, calm down. People are staring. She jerked away. I don't care. Her voice cracked slightly, a fissure in her composure that told me the anger wasn't just about money. It was about control. You just couldn't stand that I was doing better than you, could you? Better? I repeated softly. If this is what better looks like, I'll stay poor. That earned a few gasps from nearby tables. A couple in the corner exchanged glances, a waiter froze mid-step. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to win an audience. I was here to end a cycle. Roxanne's lip quivered. And for a heartbeat, she looked like the little girl who used to stomp her foot when I refused to buy her candy. But then she straightened, tilting her chin up. "You've changed," she said bitterly. "You're cold." "No," I said quietly. "I've stopped mistaking guilt for love." Ethan finally stood, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Let's go," he muttered, his hand brushing her arm again. "This is ridiculous." She glared at him but grabbed her purse. Before storming off, she leaned toward me, her voice low but venomous. "You think you've taught me something tonight? You haven't. You're pathetic, Mom. Just pathetic." And with that, she turned and strode toward the door, Ethan following behind. The silence she left behind was deafening. For a long moment, I didn't move. I stared at the empty space she'd left, feeling the weight of years settle over me, years of trying, forgiving, bending, breaking. But beneath that weight, I felt something else. Release. The waiter approached hesitantly, sympathy in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Would you like to move to another table?" I smiled faintly. "No, thank you," I replied. "I think I've had enough excitement for one evening." He nodded and walked away. I sat there, listening to the soft hum of the restaurant returning to normal. Conversations resumed, forks clinked against plates, laughter rose and fell, but I felt none of it. My chest was tight, but my mind was clear. When the check arrived, I paid, quietly, and left a generous tip. As I walked out into the night, the cool air hit my face like truth. The city was alive around me, taxis honking, people laughing, neon signs flickering. I clutched my purse to my chest and started walking toward the parking lot. Halfway to my car, I stopped and looked up at the dark sky. Somewhere in that endless black was the little girl I used to know, the one who painted flowers and danced barefoot in the kitchen. I whispered to her, not expecting an answer. "I hope you find your way back." When I got home, the silence greeted me again. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. I changed into my nightgown, washed off my makeup, and poured myself a small cup of tea. The reflection in the kitchen window looked older, yes. But steadier, a woman finally done apologizing for her own worth. The next few days were strangely peaceful. I didn't hear from Roxanne. No calls, no texts, not even a curt message. Part of me expected it. She needed time to stew, to blame, to spin the story her way. She always did. At the shop, customers came and went as usual. I smiled, arranged tulips, made small talk. But every now and then, my thoughts drifted to her. Was she angry? Probably. Embarrassed? Definitely. But maybe, just maybe, somewhere deep down, something had cracked. A seed planted, even in rocky soil, still holds the potential to grow. One afternoon, as I was closing up, June called. "Hey, I heard about your dinner," she said, her voice careful but curious. I blinked. "You did?" "Roxanne came by the shelter," she said slowly. "She dropped off the certificate. Said she didn't want it." A pang of sadness hit me. "I see. But," June added quickly, "she didn't tear it up. She just left it. That means something, Marigold. Maybe she's thinking." I smiled faintly. Maybe. That night, I placed another bouquet on the counter, wildflowers, her favorite when she was little. I tied them with a ribbon and whispered, "For when she's ready." I didn't know if she'd ever call again. I didn't know if my message had reached her at all. But I knew one thing. I had stopped letting her dictate my worth. And as I turned off the shop lights, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me, not triumph, but peace. The kind that comes from doing what's right, not what's easy. As I watched Roxanne leave, I knew this was only the beginning of her lesson. Days passed, and I didn't hear from her, just the sound of my own guilt. The kind that settles into your chest like a dull ache, whispering doubts even when you know you've done the right thing. Every morning I opened the shop, unlocked the door, and greeted customers with the same warm smile. But behind it all, my thoughts stayed tethered to Roxanne. I replayed that dinner over and over again, her raised voice, the way she'd looked at me like I'd betrayed her. Maybe, in her mind, I had. The quiet at home was thicker now. Her absence had a way of echoing through the walls. I'd set an extra place at the table out of habit, then remove it, embarrassed at myself. I'd glance at my phone, half expecting her name to appear, half dreading it, but nothing came. One morning, as I was trimming stems in the shop, my phone buzzed. It was June. Her voice carried the warmth of sunshine, the kind I needed more than I realized. "Marigold," she said, "I wanted to tell you that donation you made. It helped more than you know. We've been able to restock the pantry and fix the heating in the dorms. You should come by, see what you've done." I smiled, though my chest still felt heavy. "That's wonderful, June, really wonderful." "And the certificate," she added, hesitating slightly. "I put it up in the lobby. Everyone loves it. It gives people hope seeing someone your daughter's age supporting us." I let out a quiet laugh. "If only they knew," I said, softly. After the call, I sat down behind the counter and stared at the floral arrangements around me, all colors and life and quiet beauty. I realized something. Giving that money away hadn't left me empty. It had filled something I hadn't even known was hollow. But then came the message that unraveled my calm. A week later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman introduced herself as Tara, one of Roxanne's old friends. Her tone was hesitant, worried. "Mrs. Mayfield, I don't mean to intrude, but I thought you should know what's going on with Roxanne." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "It's Ethan. He's gone. Took her money, her laptop, even her jewelry. She's been calling people for help. She says she doesn't have anywhere to go." For a moment, the air left my lungs. I gripped the phone tightly. "Is she safe?" "I think so," Tara replied. "She's staying with a friend for now, but she's not herself. She's angry, lost. I told her to call you, but she said she couldn't." After we hung up, I sat in silence, my hands trembling. 1,000 emotions battled inside me: fear, anger, pity, and something sharper: vindication. Ethan had shown her exactly what greed led to, but I didn't want to be right. I just wanted her safe. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, every tick of the clock dragging on my nerves. The image of her sitting alone, betrayed by the man she'd chosen over me, haunted me. Yet I didn't reach out. Not immediately. She needed to be the one to take the first step this time. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again, a single text message. "Can I come home?" Those 4 words undid me. All the walls I'd built to protect myself crumbled in an instant. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed back, "Of course. Always." The following evening, headlights flashed across my driveway. I stood at the window, heart pounding. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, but not the glamorous woman I'd last seen. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared. She looked small, almost fragile, wrapped in a jacket that wasn't hers. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she burst into tears. "Mom," she choked out. "I didn't know where else to go. I didn't ask questions. I didn't scold. I just stepped forward and pulled her into my arms." She trembled against me, sobbing into my shoulder like the little girl who used to come running to me after a nightmare. We stood there for what felt like forever. Finally, I guided her inside. I made tea, the way I always did when she was upset, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd planned her first birthday, helped her with homework, written her college applications. Between shaky breaths, she told me everything. How Ethan had convinced her to invest what little she had left into his business. How he'd vanished 2 days later, leaving her with debt and humiliation. "I was so stupid," she whispered, staring down at her tea. "You were right about him, about everything." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You weren't stupid," I said softly. You were trusting. And trust, when placed in the wrong hands, can destroy us. She looked up at me, her eyes red. I don't deserve to be here. I squeezed her hand. You're my daughter. This will always be your home. But, Roxanne. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Coming home doesn't mean running away from what you did. It means facing it. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I know. I need to start over. We talked late into the night. For the first time in years, our conversation wasn't about money or success, it was about fear, regret, and the fragile hope of becoming better. When she finally went to bed in her old room, I stood outside her door for a long moment, listening to her soft breathing. My heart felt both broken and whole at once. As I turned off the hall light, I whispered to myself, maybe this is where the healing starts. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be easy. Scars like ours didn't fade overnight. I said yes, but I also knew she'd be walking into more than forgiveness. When Roxanne arrived at my doorstep, she looked nothing like the woman at that restaurant. Her sharp edges had dulled. Her confidence, once dazzling and dangerous, had crumbled into something fragile and human. The heels were gone. The designer dress replaced by wrinkled jeans and an oversized sweatshirt. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and when I opened the door she didn't speak. She just stood there, clutching a small duffel bag like a lifeline. I wanted to rush forward, to hug her right away, to wipe away the pain I'd seen coming miles before she did. But I didn't. Not yet. Something in me hesitated the same. Something that had learned love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Come in, I said softly. She stepped inside, glancing around like she was entering a stranger's house. The same floral wallpaper, the same wooden floors, the faint scent of lavender, yet everything felt foreign to her now. It hasn't changed, she murmured, setting her bag down. No, I said. But maybe we have. She gave me a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. I missed you, Mom. I nodded, my throat tight. I missed you too. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, so I busied myself with making tea, an old ritual that had somehow survived every rift between us. She sat at the table silently while I poured 2 cups, her fingers tapping anxiously against the surface. Finally, she said, I messed everything up. I didn't correct her. I didn't say, I told you so. I simply placed the cup in front of her and sat across from her. Tell me, I said. She took a shaky breath. Ethan used me, Mom. Everything he said, all the promises, the business, the plans, it was all fake. He took everything. My money, my savings, even my laptop. He left while I was asleep. I felt my stomach twist, but I kept my voice calm. And now? She looked down, her voice breaking. Now I have nothing. Not even an apartment. My landlord locked me out after I missed rent. I reached for her hand. Gently this time. You have me. That's something. Tears filled her eyes again. You shouldn't even let me in. After everything I said to you, Roxanne, I interrupted softly, I'm not here to keep score. You're my daughter. But being forgiven doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. We have to rebuild, both of us. She nodded, swallowing hard. I know, I want to, I really do. I guided her to the spare room, her old room, though she barely recognized it. The posters were gone, replaced with shelves of my old books. The bedspread was different, but the air still held faint traces of her childhood. The smell of lavender and paint. You can stay here until you get back on your feet, I said. But there will be boundaries this time. You'll help around the house, and you'll work towards something real, not a fantasy someone else sells you. Her voice was quiet. I understand. That night, I stood outside her room after she'd gone to bed. The light was still on, and I could see her silhouette through the door, sitting on the bed, motionless. It reminded me of when she was little, afraid of the dark, waiting for me to tell her everything would be okay. I wanted to say it again, to promise her safety, to make the pain disappear. But I couldn't. Not this time. She needed the truth more than comfort. Over the next few days, we found a rhythm. She helped around the house, sweeping floors, washing dishes, watering the plants at my shop. It was strange seeing her like that, quiet, subdued, almost meek. But underneath it, I could sense something beginning to change. We didn't talk much about Ethan. When she did mention him, her voice was flat, distant, like she was talking about a bad dream. Instead, she started asking small questions about the shop. How do you keep the roses from wilting so fast? Do customers ever get flowers just for themselves? One afternoon, she followed me there, rolling up her sleeves to help. Watching her trim stems and arrange petals, I felt something in me stir a cautious hope. Not bad, I said, glancing at her handiwork. She gave me a tired smile. You make it look easy. It's not, I replied. It just takes patience. She nodded. I could use some of that. That evening, we shared dinner in silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the gentle kind that speaks of peace returning in fragments. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. But just when I started to believe she was changing, life reminded me that old habits don't die quietly. 2 weeks after she'd moved back in, I went to tidy her room while she was out. As I picked up a pile of clothes, something caught my eye, the corner of a white envelope peeking from her bag. My heart sank before I even touched it. I pulled it out carefully. Inside were printed documents, business proposals, investor forms, and a fake logo that read RM Solutions. My name appeared at the bottom of the letterhead, Marigold Mayfield, co-founder and investor. The air rushed out of my lungs. She'd been planning something again. A new scheme. A new manipulation. And worse, she was using me to make it credible. I sat on the edge of her bed, the papers trembling in my hands. All that progress, all that hope, it all felt like a fragile house of cards collapsing under the faintest breath. When I heard the front door open downstairs, I tucked the papers back into the envelope and waited. That night, when she came up the stairs, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope beside me. Her eyes froze the moment she saw it. But when I found what she'd hidden in her bag, I realized some lessons take longer to learn. It was tucked under her clothes, another envelope, but not from me. I'd seen enough contracts in my life to recognize what they were before I even unfolded them. Pages filled with jargon and inflated promises, the kind of language meant to sound professional but hide desperation. At the top, in bold, it read, RM Solutions, Business Expansion Proposal. My own name, written neatly beneath hers as co-founder. I felt the blood drain from my face. She hadn't changed, not really. She'd just shifted her target. When Roxanne walked into the kitchen that night, she stopped cold. Her gaze darted from the envelope to my face, and in that instant, she knew. The color drained from her cheeks. Where did you? I found it, I said evenly. My voice was calm, but underneath it, I was shaking. In your bag. You want to explain why my name is on a business proposal I've never seen? Her lips parted, but no words came. She pulled out a chair and sank into it, her hands trembling. It's not what it looks like, she said finally, her voice small. Then tell me what it is, I said, pushing the papers toward her. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what you did before trying to use my name and my savings for something you haven't even earned. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't sure yet if they were from guilt or fear. I wasn't going to ask you for money this time, she said quickly. I swear. I was just going to use your name for credibility. It's stupid, I know. But people trust older investors. I thought if they saw your name, they'd take me seriously. I stared at her, stunned by the twisted logic. So your plan was to build trust by lying? She winced. I didn't think of it like that. I'm tired of failing. I'm tired of everyone thinking I can't do anything right. I wanted to fix it myself this time. I took a deep breath and sat across from her. And lying was how you planned to fix it? Her face crumpled. I don't know. I don't know how to be any other way anymore. Everything I touch turns into a disaster. I thought maybe if I could just get one thing right. The anger in me softened slightly, replaced by something far heavier. Sorrow. Roxanne, I said quietly, you've been chasing shortcuts your whole life. But success doesn't come from taking, it comes from building. Slowly. Honestly, the problem isn't that you fail. It's that you refuse to learn. She wiped at her tears, her mascara smudging. You think I don't know that? You think I don't hate myself for it? Her words hung between us like the scent of smoke after a fire, heavy, lingering, impossible to ignore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold, trembling. You're not a bad person, Roxanne, I said softly. But you're lost, and as long as you keep trying to buy your way out of pain, you'll never find your way. She looked up, her eyes glistening with shame. I don't know how to start over. You start small, I said. With something real. Something that doesn't need pretending. She blinked. Like what? June's shelter, I said simply. You remember the place I donated to in your name? They need volunteers. Go there, work, listen, see what the world looks like beyond what you can take from it. Her brows furrowed. You're telling me to volunteer? Yes, I said firmly. If you want to prove to yourself that you can change, that's where you start. No more fake ventures. No more luxury branding. Just honest work. She hesitated, looking down at the papers, and if I don't, I met her gaze steadily. Then I can't keep helping you. You can stay here, but I won't watch you lie your way into another fall. The silence stretched long and thin. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. I didn't believe her right away, not fully. But when she went upstairs that night, I saw something new in her walk. Not confidence, not even determination, just exhaustion. The kind that comes when you're finally too tired to lie anymore. After she went to bed, I gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and tucked them into a drawer. I didn't throw them away. Part of me wanted her to see them again someday as proof of how close she came to losing herself once more. The next morning she woke early. I found her standing by the kitchen window, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked almost young again. I called June, she said quietly. She said I could start today. I smiled faintly, hiding the swell of emotion that rose in my chest. Good. Just keep an open mind. It might not be glamorous, but it's real. She nodded and grabbed her coat. At the door, she turned back to me. Mom, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm sorry. For everything. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I knew words were only the beginning. Still, I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Go, I said softly. You have a new lesson waiting. As she walked down the path, I watched from the window, the morning light catching her shoulders like a quiet promise. Maybe this was her turning point. Or maybe it was just another false start. But for the first time, I didn't try to control the outcome. I just let her go, trusting that the world, not me, would be her teacher now. And that's when the real transformation began. Roxanne's first day at Hope Haven wasn't glamorous, it was humbling. When she came home that evening, she smelled faintly of bleach and soup, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her nails chipped. For the first time in years, she looked like herself. Raw, unfiltered, real. She slumped into the kitchen chair with a sigh and stared at her hands as if she didn't recognize them anymore. How was it? I asked, pouring her a cup of tea. She gave a tired laugh. Long, loud, messy, the ceiling leaks, the heat's broken, and there was this one guy who just kept singing show tunes while I tried to mop. I smiled softly. And? She paused, her expression softening. And I didn't hate it. It was the first honest thing she'd said in months. Over the next week, I watched small changes begin to take shape in her. She started leaving earlier in the mornings, not to meet clients or investors, but to help serve breakfast at the shelter. The woman who used to complain about waiting in line for coffee now woke up before dawn to pour it for others. Each night she came home quieter, not defeated, but reflective, like someone hearing their own thoughts for the first time. She told me stories about the people she met there. There was Denise, a mother of 3 who'd lost her home after a medical bill ruined her credit. And Paul, a man with a soft stutter who always offered to sweep even when his back ached. There was laughter, too, the kind that sounded fragile but pure. One evening, as we sat eating dinner, she said, "You know what's weird? They're all grateful for everything, like, for things that don't even make sense. A hot meal, a smile, a warm room. I've had all of that my whole life, and I never even noticed." Her eyes were glistening when she looked up at me. "You tried to tell me, didn't you?" I nodded. "Sometimes you have to lose everything before you realize what you really had." She stared into her cup for a long time. "I think I finally get what you were trying to do with that donation. I didn't do it to hurt you," I said softly. "I did it because I needed you to see that value isn't in what we own. It's in what we give." Roxanne nodded slowly. "I know that now. But change, I learned, isn't a moment, it's a process." For every new layer of humility she uncovered, another layer of shame came with it. Some nights she'd cry quietly in her room, thinking I couldn't hear. Other times she'd snap at me over nothing, then apologize 10 minutes later. Healing is never neat. It's jagged and uneven. Still, she kept showing up to that shelter, day after day. One afternoon, June called me. "You should see her, Marigold," she said, her voice bright. "She's incredible. She organizes, she listens, she even brings in flowers from your shop to brighten the tables. The residents love her." I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. "She's starting to see the world differently," June chuckled. "She's starting to see herself differently." That night, Roxanne came home carrying a small paper bag. "The kids at the shelter made this for you," she said shyly, handing it over. Inside was a handmade card with crayon drawings of hearts and flowers. The words, written in shaky handwriting, read, "Thank you for helping us. Miss Roxanne says you have the kindest heart." I blinked back tears. "They made this?" She nodded, a small, proud smile tugging at her lips. "They wanted to thank you for raising me." That sentence, so simple, so unexpected, hit me like sunlight after a storm. For years, I'd wondered if I'd failed her. But maybe I hadn't failed completely. Maybe she just needed to find her way back to the parts of herself I'd loved most. A few weeks later, she told me she wanted to do something special. "They're always short on supplies," she said. "So I'm selling my old designer stuff, all the handbags, the heels, the junk I don't need. I buy winter coats for the families." I tried to hide my surprise, but she caught it. "What?" she asked, smirking faintly. "Shocked I'm not hoarding them?" "No," I said, smiling. "Just proud." When she left the room, I sat for a while, letting that word echo in my mind. Proud. It had been so long since I'd been able to use it honestly. Watching her grow through pain and humility wasn't easy, but it was beautiful. Like watching a wilting flower find sunlight again. That weekend, I stopped by the shelter myself. Roxanne was in the kitchen, ladling soup into bowls. She looked up and grinned when she saw me. "You came!" I nodded, my throat thick. "I wanted to see your world." She laughed softly. "Not my world, Mom. Ours." I stayed for a while, helping her serve meals and talking with the residents. Their gratitude was quiet but overwhelming. I understood then why Roxanne kept coming back. Giving was addictive, in the purest way. Later, when we got home, she sat on the couch, hugging her knees to her chest. "You know," she said, "for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm pretending. I feel good." I looked at her. Really looked at her. And realized I hadn't seen that light in her eyes since she was a little girl painting tulips at the kitchen table. But I didn't expect her to go back to that restaurant alone. Roxanne returned to that same restaurant, but not as the woman who once flaunted greed. She didn't tell me she was going, I found out later, but part of me wasn't surprised. Some moments in life demand to be revisited, not for vanity or revenge, but for closure. And that night, she went to reclaim the piece of herself she'd left behind under that golden chandelier. The night she'd screamed at her mother and stormed away with pride instead of peace. She told me later how it unfolded. She'd taken the bus instead of a taxi. The hostess, the same young woman from before, recognized her but hesitated before speaking. Roxanne smiled gently and said, "Table for one, please." Gone was the arrogance, the demand to be noticed. She didn't wear diamonds or silk, just a soft gray sweater and jeans. Still, the hostess's eyes softened. Maybe she sensed the difference too. The restaurant hadn't changed: the faint hum of jazz, the clinking of glasses, the smell of butter and wine. But Roxanne said it felt smaller now, like the illusion of grandeur had cracked. "It's strange," she told me later, "how something can look the same but feel completely different once you've changed." She asked for the same table. The waiter, perhaps remembering the scene months earlier, looked uncertain when he approached. "Good evening, Miss Mayfield," he said cautiously. "Will anyone be joining you tonight?" She smiled faintly. "No, just me." He nodded and handed her a menu, but she waved it off. "Actually, I'm not here to eat. I was wondering if I could speak with your manager." A few minutes later, the manager appeared, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a polite, professional smile. "Good evening, ma'am. How can I help you?" Roxanne reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper and an envelope. "I wanted to make a donation," she said softly, "to cover the cost of meals for families who can't afford to eat here. Maybe single parents celebrating something special. You can decide who." The man blinked, caught off guard. "That's incredibly generous. May I ask what inspired this?" She hesitated, then smiled. "A dinner I once got very wrong." He accepted the envelope with a nod of respect. "We'll make sure it's used well, thank you." As she stood to leave, the waiter stopped her. "Miss Mayfield?" She turned, and he offered a small smile. "It's good to see you again. You look happy." Roxanne told me later that she walked out into the night feeling lighter than she'd ever felt before. No anger, no shame, just clarity, the kind that comes when you stop running from the mirror and finally face what's there. When she called me that evening, I could hear the emotion in her voice even before she spoke. "Mom," she said, her words soft, trembling. "I went back. I didn't need to ask where." "And how did it feel?" I asked quietly. "Different," she said. "Better. Like I finally ended something that started a long time ago." "What did you do?" I asked. She hesitated, then admitted. "I gave back, not because I felt guilty but because I wanted to. I wanted to turn that place into a memory that means something good." Tears welled in my eyes. "Roxanne," I whispered, "I'm so proud of you." There was silence on the line for a few seconds before she said, "You know, Mom, I used to think money was everything. That it could buy happiness, fix my mistakes, prove my worth, but it never did. It just made me chase things that didn't matter. What you did, that donation, it hurt at first. But it woke me up. It showed me how poor I'd been all along." My heart swelled, breaking and healing at once. "It wasn't about hurting you," I said. "It was about reminding you who you were before the world told you otherwise." "I know," she whispered. "And I'll never forget it." When she came home that night, she looked peaceful. She sat beside me on the couch, leaning her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. "You know what's funny?" she said. "That restaurant used to make me feel powerful. Tonight, it made me feel human. I think I like that better." I laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Power fades. Humanity lasts." She smiled. "I think I finally understand that." A week later, I visited the shelter again with her. Everyone greeted her like family. She moved through the room with quiet confidence, serving meals, laughing, helping without pretense. I stood back and watched her, the same girl who once measured her worth in dollars, now finding joy in small acts of service. It was poetic, in the gentlest way. After the meal, she pulled me aside. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her tone hesitant but hopeful. I want to organize a fundraiser for Hope Haven. Maybe a small dinner, nothing fancy, just real people helping each other. I smiled. That sounds perfect. And it was. Watching her rediscover kindness, not as an obligation but as a calling, was more powerful than any revenge could have ever been. My revenge had bloomed into redemption, hers and mine. Later that night, as we washed dishes together, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Something I've been meaning to give you," she said, her eyes glinting with emotion. "Don't open it yet." I placed it on the counter, curious but patient. She smiled. "You'll know when it's time." That envelope would sit unopened on my nightstand for a few days, waiting for the right moment, the final piece of our story. She called Marigold afterward, voice trembling with sincerity. "Mom," she said, "thank you for teaching me what money can't buy." It was simple, unsealed, and resting on my nightstand with my name in her handwriting. For days, I'd resisted the urge to open it. I'd seen enough envelopes in this story of ours to know they carried more than just paper. They carried meaning, consequences, turning points. But that night, something felt different. The house was quiet, the moonlight spilling through the curtains in soft silver ribbons, and my heart told me the moment had finally come. I picked it up gently, running my fingers over her handwriting. It was steady, now, confident, calm. The loops of her letters no longer screamed for attention. They simply existed. I unfolded the note inside and let my eyes trace the words. "Mom," it began, "I've been trying to figure out how to say thank you, but no words seem big enough. You didn't just save me, you reminded me who I was before I let pride and greed turn me into someone I didn't recognize. For so long, I thought you were holding me back. When really, you were trying to keep me from losing myself." Already, my vision blurred. I blinked, forcing the tears back so I could read the rest. "I know I've hurt you. I said things that still echo in my head, things I wish I could take back, but I hope this letter can start to repay what I took for granted. I want to give something back, even if it's just a small reflection of what you've given me all my life." Tucked inside the note was a folded check. I opened it and froze. $2,000, the exact amount I'd donated in her name months ago. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the money that stunned me. It was the symbol. The same figure that had once been a weapon demanded, argued over, fought for, now lay before me as an offering. An act of understanding, of love returned in its truest form. I read on. "This isn't repayment," she'd written. "You don't owe me forgiveness, and I don't owe you a debt. This is a circle. What started with anger and pride ends with gratitude. I earned this money honestly. I've been working part-time at the shelter, helping with administration. June pays me a little, and I saved every cent. I wanted to give this to you not because you need it, but because I finally understand what it means to give." By now, my tears had fallen freely onto the page, blurring her words. I pressed a hand to my mouth, shaking silently. "I love you, Mom," the letter continued. "Thank you for loving me enough to let me fall, and for standing still long enough for me to find my way back. You taught me something money can't measure, that love isn't about giving everything, it's about giving the right things." When I finished reading, I held the letter to my chest and wept. Not the bitter, aching tears of regret, but the kind that cleanse soft, forgiving, full of release. The kind that say, "We made it through." For years I'd carried guilt like an anchor, guilt for spoiling her, for enabling her, for not knowing when to stop rescuing her. I thought I'd failed her as a mother. But as I sat there with that letter in my hands, I realized I hadn't failed at all. I'd just taken the long, hard road to the right lesson. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to her room, the one that had become her sanctuary again. She was already asleep, curled up beneath the quilt I'd made her as a child. Her face looked peaceful, no makeup, no tension, no walls. I stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by love and humility. She stirred slightly, sensing me there. "Mom?" she mumbled sleepily. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," I whispered. But she blinked her eyes open anyway, smiling faintly. "Did you open it?" I did. Her smile grew, soft and knowing. Do you forgive me? There's nothing left to forgive, I said. She reached for my hand weakly, half dreaming. Then, we're even. I brushed her hair back gently. We're not even, I said. We're whole. When she drifted back to sleep, I returned to my room and placed the check and letter in a small wooden box, the same one where I kept her baby bracelet, her first drawing, and a lock of her hair from her first haircut. Those were my treasures, the milestones of her becoming. And this letter? It was the final piece. The proof that she had become the woman I always hoped she'd be. In the morning, over breakfast, she was back to her usual bright self, humming softly as she made coffee. You know, she said casually, June told me they're hosting another dinner next month. This time it's a fundraiser, and they want me to speak. Can you believe that? I smiled over my cup. Yes, I said, I can. She grinned. I'm thinking of calling my speech What Money Can't Buy. I laughed quietly. Fitting title. Think people will listen? She asked. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. They will. Because it's not just a story, Roxanne, it's a testimony. She smiled, her eyes bright with tears she didn't bother to hide. When she left for the shelter that day, the morning light poured through the window, touching every corner of the kitchen with warmth. I sat there for a long time, letting gratitude fill the spaces where guilt used to live. That letter, that simple envelope, had closed the loop between us. She thanked her mother for loving her enough to let her fall, and for teaching her what love without conditions truly means. People think revenge means hurting someone, but I learned it can mean healing them instead. That's the truth I carry now, the one that took nearly losing my daughter to discover. Looking back, I realized the story of Roxanne and me was never really about money. It was about love misunderstood, love misplaced, and finally love reclaimed. When I wake up now, the air feels lighter. The mornings no longer begin with worry but with quiet purpose. Roxanne and I have fallen into a gentle rhythm. She works full-time at Hope Haven now, managing volunteer schedules and coordinating donations. She's the one calling people now, convincing them to give, not take. Sometimes I watch her from across the room at community events, watching her smile with that same spark she had as a little girl, only softer now. Genuine. I still run my flower shop, of course. The business has never been busier. People seem drawn to the warmth in the arrangements lately, or maybe they sense the peace in me. Roxanne helps on weekends when she can, trimming stems, sweeping floors, laughing with customers. There's a joy in her now that money could never have bought. One Saturday, I delivered flowers to the shelter together. As we walked through the doors, the residents cheered when they saw her. "Miss Roxanne!" one of the kids shouted, running up to hug her. The sight of it nearly undid me. For years, she'd wanted to be admired. Now, she was loved. There's a difference, and she finally understood it. She spends her evenings writing now, too. "I want to tell our story someday," she told me recently. "Not the embarrassing parts, just the truth. The part where I stopped measuring worth in dollars and started measuring it in decency." I smiled. "Then tell it all," I said. "Even the ugly parts. The ugly parts are where the truth lives." A few weeks later, she gave her first public speech at the shelter's fundraiser. I sat in the front row, my heart swelling with pride as she walked onto the small stage, wearing a simple blue dress and a smile that glowed. She took a deep breath and began. "A year ago, I asked my mother for $2,000. I thought I needed it to start my dream. But what I really needed was to lose everything before I could understand what dreams were worth chasing." Her voice shook, but she continued bravely. "That night, my mother donated that money instead, not to me, but in my name. To this shelter." I was furious. I thought she'd humiliated me. But what she did was save me. She reminded me that giving doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. June hugged her afterward, whispering, "Your mom's proud, you know." And she was right, I was. Proud in a way that felt holy, like forgiveness had bloomed between us and turned into something unbreakable. After the event, Roxanne and I walked home together. The night was cool, the stars shy behind a thin veil of clouds. "You know," she said quietly, I used to think the best thing I could bring to dinner was money. But you brought something better that night, something I'll never forget. I looked at her, smiling softly. What's that? She slipped her arm through mine. A lesson wrapped in love. We walked in silence for a while, our steps matching, our hearts finally moving at the same rhythm. When we reached the house, she turned to me and said, I want to take you somewhere next week, my treat. Where? I asked, laughing. Another fancy restaurant? She shook her head. No. Dinner at the shelter. They're hosting a gratitude night. You gave them hope once, now I want you to see how it's grown. That following Friday, we went. The tables were decorated with simple candles and wildflowers from my shop. The room buzzed with warmth and laughter. Former residents stood up one by one, sharing their stories of recovery, of second chances, of kindness from strangers. Each one mentioned Roxanne's name. When she took the stage to thank them, she glanced at me and smiled through tears. I used to think my mom ruined a dinner once, she said, her voice trembling. But what she really did was start this one. The applause that followed was thunderous, but all I could hear was my heartbeat steady, full, alive. Afterward, we sat together, holding hands as the last guests left. The same envelope that once represented greed and guilt had become a symbol of grace. The same dinner that once tore us apart had brought us home to each other. I don't know if revenge was ever the right word for what I did. Maybe it started that way, an act of defiance, a spark of pride. But what it became was something deeper, purer. It was love reclaiming its dignity. It was a mother teaching her daughter that money can fill a wallet, but never a soul. Now, when people ask about my relationship with Roxanne, I just smile and say, we had dinner once and it changed everything. She laughs whenever she hears that. You make it sound like magic. And maybe it was. Not the glittering kind, but the kind that grows quietly, patiently, from pain and forgiveness. Because sometimes, the richest thing you can bring to dinner is a mother's lesson finally understood.